Welcome on to this edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. Today we are talking about a run walk strategy. And before you tune out, this is important, okay? It is one of the pillars that we talk about here at coachparry.com, particularly for over 50s runners. And we get a lot of pushback. This is probably one of the things we get the most pushback about. So I really want to urge you to approach this podcast with an open mind, because it can change the way you run into your 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. My name is Brad Nadauld. We've got the coach Lindsey Parry with us once again. Lindsey, nice to see you. And it's quite funny that we are doing this today because I ran another ultramarathon yesterday, and there was lots of run walking in yesterday's run.
Yeah, and just such a good strategy for racing and training, Brad. So I think well, you've always been a convert. I think you did run walking before you knew it was a strategy. You were just doing it. But yeah, just a very effective tool for making running more enjoyable, getting more out of your running, reducing your risk of picking up overuse injuries. It's a long list of good things that come out of run walking.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about some of the benefits, why you should be doing it. But as I said, one of the big pushbacks or the pieces of sort of where people push back on this is they feel that they can't run fast and employ a run walk strategy. And we're going to show you today that you absolutely can. It is possible, and it's not just possible. There are tons of people doing it. So we really want to show you how to do that. And we're going to be digging deep into it today. Lindsey, your training going well? I mean, I know you've got a big marathon coming up in the sort of final third of the year, but you've been consistent, which is half the battle won.
100%. And just last week did my first cross country in almost 3 years. I've always loved cross country as a basis for marathon training, to be honest. But this had the dual purpose of showing me where I'm at and how much training I need to do, and just giving me, getting me motivated. My daughter plays field hockey, and I was running around the field when she was practicing, when I suddenly remembered, like, hey, my first running love was cross country. I've been struggling with motivation to just get consistent. Winter was coming. We are now in winter. And I was thinking to myself, well, how am I going to motivate myself so that I can get fit enough to train for a marathon starting on the 29th of June? And there I was, just really enjoying the kind of cross country bit that I was running. And I was like, here we go, cross country. Fast forward a couple of weeks, it's been going consistently again. I'm not fit. Cross country is hard. But I've got a whole bunch of races coming, cross country races coming up, that'll help me track my improvement. And I've got some motivation so that the next one doesn't feel as hard as the first one felt.
I was going to say there's no better way than shocking your system into action. That's the way you do it with cross country. I'm not a fan of cross country just because I don't like bleeding through my eyeballs. That's the reason I don't like doing cross country. I'll stick to the longer ones. Thanks. I've got another big ultra, and this is the one that I've been training for. It's in 5 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, somewhere around there. 8th of June, running the Comrades Marathon. For those of you who don't know, the world's largest and oldest ultra marathon taking place in South Africa. It's been 12 years since I ran my last one, and looking forward to running another one on the 8th of June. Going to be lots of run walking in that one, that is for sure as well. Lindsey, let's just talk a little bit about run walk, and particularly in the over 50s market, or not market, in the over 50s sort of community. Why run walking is like so beneficial for runners over 50?
So I think because the psychology around slowing down is so difficult. Okay, so we can talk about the benefits and why it is so good to do it. But I think the reason why, the immediate short term, why you get all those benefits out of it, is because it's a very difficult concept, slowing down and accepting that we are slowing down. And it's most obvious in our easy training runs. And because we're so caught in our ways and what we have done has always worked, we lose sight of effort and we start focusing on pace. And, my client, Jackie, who we've spoken about quite a lot in this space, and particularly around this topic. And we talk about her often because she's just like the classic example of this. And that is that she was defending this line. Like in her brain, if she started running her everyday training runs slower than 6 minutes a K, that somehow would make her rubbish or no longer a runner, or whatever the psychology was that she was experiencing. But then she had 2 or 3 runs with a friend that she was trying to help out, and those were run at 6:45, so miles slower than 6 minutes a K. But she suddenly pitched up for our weekly meeting and was like, I feel amazing. And I finally understand what you've been trying to tell me. And then she went on to break 4 hours reasonably comfortably in a marathon again, which is something she tried for 3 marathons before that and hadn't gotten right, even though a lot of the numbers pointed towards her doing it. Now she went 6:45 minutes per K, and then suddenly she was back under 4 minutes K. So it's that kind of psychology that, how do I slow down? And so that's where the run walk is fantastic, because now we can focus on something else that just forces us to slow down just that little bit. And it makes us go that fraction easier. And then the surprising thing is that it doesn't actually slow us down. So that's, we'll get into that much later. But because you're actually still moving forward, and because the walk breaks are often quite short, depending on exactly what ratio we settle on and everything, the actual overall impact is that you aren't losing much. And over time, because we're now putting you training easy enough, and we suddenly pushing you back into that aerobic zone where we want you to be, and your legs are fresher, you're ending session stronger, all etc., you then do find yourself getting a little bit quicker again. But in the immediate short term, why do I find it such an effective strategy? It's because I can get people to do it, and that forces them to do the other things that I'm trying to get them to do, which is to go easier on their easy, and especially on their long runs. That's where it's really works the best.
Yeah, Lindsey, I mean, early on in your career, you were very focused on the elite end of the field. I mean, you've worked with, I mean, you've been to 4 different Olympic Games. You've worked with folks who've won like really big races. Where did this run walk strategy first come onto your radar, and what made you then start digging into it and start advocating for it?
So the very first place that it came onto my radar was actually in triathlon, rather than actually in running. And that was literally personal experience, is that, you know, you get your special need bags, and also when you're transitioning from running to cycling, or when in duathlon you transition run, cycle, run. And what I realized in all of this stuff and getting special need bag is that often I was just forced into situations where I had to take a short walk, or if you drop in the early days where we used to do laps, and you'd have to get elastics, and I'd drop an elastic, and then I'd have to walk, and I would always feel so good after the walk. So that was kind of my first, like, hang on, what's going on here? And I remember one year where just this one time that it didn't work, but it's an amusing story, because I was very unfit, and I decided that I was going to run Two Oceans, which is another one of our big ultras in South Africa, with my dad. And he was very fit. He was over 50. I was not. But he was very fit and I was very unfit. And I was like, fine. The only way I can do this with my dad is I can do a run walk strategy. And it would have worked, except that because my dad was very fit and he wasn't walking, I was having to run so hard to catch him after every walk that eventually that's what ended it for me. But anyway, it came onto my radar through, you wanted to say something
No,
there before I
I'm just
carry on.
laughing at
No,
you chasing your dad. I can just picture it.
yeah, so eventually after 28 Ks of this, I couldn't keep up with him anymore, and off he went. But once he left me, I actually enjoyed the rest, and I did very nearly catch him. We only finished a few minutes apart, so I did actually end up almost catching him. But yeah, so it was from triathlon I realized how good this felt, and then of course I did some multi-day stuff. I did the Krabi's extreme marathon, and I mean, there is no other way to do it. And again, that whole experience of run walking in the Krabi's desert, I was sold on it for the very long stuff. And then I think everybody by now has heard of Jeff Galloway, but he kind of then it I guess he was already around, but information didn't disseminate in the same way that it does now or as quickly. So once I really started digging around and seeing what evidence there was, there was Jeff Galloway had written a book. And then we refer to that as Jeffing. And so it was out there. There was proven cases. I'd experienced how it works. I'd seen these ultra distance crazies doing it. And so I started bringing us into just my everyday coaching, especially with the non-elite side of the sport. But yeah, then I ended up coaching then Caroline Wassman, now Caroline Cherry. And she came from an amateur background, became a professional athlete, went on to win comrades. And when we were sitting there discussing the uprun, and she said to me, like, I've never run comrades without walking. And I was like, well, nothing new on race day. We're not going to change that. Not going to change that strategy, And so that year uprun, she did the run walk strategy. And, the first time they caught her on camera walking, it was while she was eating a banana. So she was literally walking just so that she could get the banana down properly. And it was on quite a steep uphill. And she'd just taken the lead. So it was all it was all happening. It was 36 Ks into the race. She was going up one of the steeper hills. She was eating a banana. She'd just gone into the lead, passing the then Russian twins, which were unbeatable at that point in time. And the commentators like, oh, she's gone out too hard. She's blown. She's walking. It's the end of her race. And it was much later in the race because then she got caught on camera walking on another 2 occasions after that. And then on her fourth walk, someone in the commentary team finally said, actually, we just think this is part of Caroline's strategy. And she literally had 4 places on the route where she'd always walked, and that's where we walked. And yeah, it was the fastest average time that had ever been run on Comrades. So Comrades, it has a best time, but because the route changes subtly every year, and this year, because of roadworks, it was 800 meters longer. So her average pace was the fastest pace ever run for the uprun, but it was unfortunately not a record. But that just, again, highlights the point that this strategy isn't, it doesn't make you slower, okay, in the overall picture. But yeah, that kind of gives you the spread of how this evolved. And then, yeah, everyone on the podcasts know the journey I've walked with my dad and how we got him to run less, run easier, run slower. And the run walk strategy is the answer. My dad did a 50K race 2 weeks ago in 5 hours 45 run walk strategy, and he told me he's still cramped up a bit. It's a fairly tough ultra, the Loskop Marathon it's called. And he said to me afterwards, I chatted to him on the phone. My mom was mega relieved. She was like, your father looked much better, because the last few races he's looked terrible and hasn't been able to hold himself upright. And the difference there was run, walk plus nutrition are the 2 things that we sorted out for that one. So yeah, again, just that's the evolution of it. That's why we do it. And it's just a highly effective strategy.
Yeah, Lindsey, and let's just add as well. You said at 5:45. How old is your dad today?
75 years old.
There you go.
Or turning 75 this year. He's either 74 and turning 75. I think that's right. But either way, yeah.
I was going to
Been
say
around a bit.
74, unless I've missed his birthday, but there we go. So 74, a 50K ultra marathon in 5:45, which is just absolutely phenomenal. And Lindsey, I think where a lot of people, I mean, we talk run, walk, and a lot of go, well, I walk in an ultra or I walk in a marathon. But the key word here is a strategy. It's like we're going in with a specific strategy of when we are running and when we are walking. And that's what makes this thing work, because a lot of people sort of feel like they giving up if they're walking, so they've got to push as much as they can when they're running, and then they walk if the wheels have come off. If they don't walk, it's been a good day. And I mean, my dad ran in the 80s and 90s, and still to this day, like I'll say to him, I've gone out for a run, and he'll say to me, did you walk? And I'll say to him, yeah, of course I walked. And he said to me, see, it's because you're unfit. I can be training for an ultra marathon. I'm training for an ultra marathon. I ran one yesterday, but because I walked in a run, I'm unfit, according to my dad. So there's a mind shift change here, but it is a key strategy that we're putting in. Can you explain just briefly what the strategy is, and then we'll talk about how to implement it as we go?
Yeah, and the strategy is what you've got to come up with. So, and I think this is again why Jeff Galloway was able to make it so popular is firstly because he started Jeffing for older people who wanted to run. And so it takes a lot of pressure off, So he likes to have a much higher walk to run ratio than I like to have, but the principle is there. It makes running more enjoyable, and it takes a lot of the pressure off. And so I think this is the key, is that you have to have a strategy and how it's going to work for you. And when I'm working out strategy with people that I work with, I try to use their personality to make an assessment of how much walking I need them to do. But I also do it on a loosely sliding scale on ability. Okay. So, and age. So those are the three factors that I'm always taking into account when I'm setting up the strategy of how we're going to do this. Now, the personality part's important, because if I was dealing with your father, I would have to let him run long enough that he feels like he's done enough work to earn, in inverted commas, earn his walk. Okay, so that will just be his personality type, and I might be able to tweak the strategy once he's bought into the concept, because he's seen how successful it is and how well it works for him. But at the beginning, I need to take that personality into account. If I've got a much more laissez-faire person, I will let them walk more frequently. But someone like your dad, longer runs, shorter walks, just get them doing it so that they can feel the benefits. Then we can start tweaking the strategy. And then I kind of jump onto this sliding scale where we've got youth on one end of the scale, and we've got age on the other end of the scale. And then we've got speed, which is fast on one end of the scale and slow on the other end of the scale. And so the reason I've got both of those is because if I'm dealing with a 30-year-old that runs a 3-hour marathon, they are young and they are fast. If I am dealing with a 75-year-old and they run a 4-hour marathon, they are older, but they are fast. Okay, so that speed sliding scale is relative to the person that I'm dealing with. Okay, a 30-year-old who runs a 5-hour marathon is young, but not so fast, whereas an 80-year-old who runs a 5-hour marathon is fast. So that 80-year-old, I'll have to load in more walking to take the age into account, but it would be less than an 80-year-old that runs a 7.5-hour marathon, for example. So that's just how we take these sliding scales into account. And then, as a very kind of general rule of thumb, if I'm not actually physically looking at the person, that's what I'll do, is like basically younger and faster will run more and walk less, and older and slower will just walk more frequently. So someone on the fast young age of the spectrum, for example, would be something along the lines of a 9 to 10 kilometer walk. I like to not walk, run. I like to work in kind of roundish numbers, so the miles and the Ks don't always match up perfectly, but that'll be sort of a 6 mile or 9 to 10K run 1 minute walk type of strategy. And then on the far end of the scale, the older and the slower runners, I will tend to do like 2 miles at most running with a 1 minute to sometimes 2 minute walk, or 3 kilometer, 1 minute, 2 minute walk. That's kind of how I'll do that.
I love that. Lindsey, let's just talk about the sort of physical and physiological benefits of using one of these strategies, particularly as we get older. Like what's the benefit of doing it? Why should we be doing it? If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsey and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
So the physical benefits, Brad, are the biggest. Okay, so the physiological benefits are obviously good, but we can still get those from running slightly too hard. And again, I'm using inverted commas here again for the people listening rather than watching. But the physical benefits are the biggest and most important. The physical benefit is that we do less damage to the muscles, joints, and ligaments. Okay, so it forces us to go at lower impact when we're running. So when we only run, there's much more impact, much more damage done to muscles, much more damage done to tendons and ligaments. And then the body has to work harder between bouts of running to physically repair the damage from running. And that becomes more and more important as we get older, more and more important as our muscles atrophy and we lose muscle. Even if we're doing strength training diligently, we still lose muscle mass. And so that is the physical impact is the biggest. On the physiological side, we want to keep ourselves well in the aerobic zone. And you can run and stay in the aerobic zone, but be right at the top of that aerobic zone. And so now you're getting full physiological development, but you're smashing your legs to pieces. Okay. When you throw in the walking breaks, you will keep those exact same physiological benefits, but you just take away that smashing impact on, in particular, your quads, but your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, everything that you use in running. So that is really the biggest benefit to the run walk. That's on a day-to-day training, but for the exact same reason, when we get into a race type of scenario where speed becomes important, because when we're running, because when we're walking, we're still moving forward. And this is the part that people always forget, is like, because you're still moving forward, if you walk for a minute, you haven't lost a minute. Okay. You've probably lost less than 30 seconds, maybe 10 seconds in that kilometer that you walk in. But even if your overall pace drops just that fraction in the first 30 kilometers of the race, or the first 30% of the race, sorry, we don't know how long the race is. What it means is that in the final 30% of the race, you can just carry on with that pace. There isn't a slowing down. There isn't forced walking. There's not long periods of forced walking. So those are the two ends of the scale. The one is for training. It's that physical sparing effect. Allows you to train better, train longer, get more kilometers in at lower risk, and you enjoy it more. Your injury risk comes down, and then those same benefits pull into a race scenario where, because we're doing less damage early, we've got more energy available later.
Lindsey, when you talk about the actual walk itself, I think this also where people sort of are a bit misguided. It's not a stroll. It's not like you're running and then you just put off the gas and you're having a nice little Sunday stroll. It's quite a deliberate walk that you are doing.
Yeah. So it's not quite like race walk, power walk, because then it wouldn't be a rest at all. And that's actually the point. It's not it's not a rest. So that I actually snookered myself there, but it's not a it shouldn't be seen as a rest. It should be seen as a change in what we're doing, and in a reduction in impact forces. So we want to walk fast, but you're not trying to walk as fast as you can, but you must still feel like you are putting in effort to walk. I think that's the best way to describe it. You're not walking the dogs. You're not having a chat with your mate, walking down to the local pub or going down to the river for a stroll with your partner. It's a walk.
Yeah, I sort of equated to like you've got 5 minutes to get to the bank because the bank is closing. It's like that sort of walk. Yeah. That's the sort of pace you're going. Cool. And then, Lindsey, let's just talk about for distances. Obviously, one thing, and it was so, I think it was on last week's podcast, you were explaining, there was a question about zone 2 running, and you were talking about sort of if you walked, you could run for longer as opposed to running at a high intensity for a minute. And it was a really cool way you explained that. But let's talk a little bit about, obviously, this allows you to run further for longer by incorporating a run-walk strategy, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But does this work across all distances? So if you're training for a 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, and beyond?
Yeah, and obviously the further we run, the easier it is for me to convince people to try it. Okay, because the longer the distances we're training for, the longer the distances we are going to run in training, and so then people can logically see the reward in doing it this way. When people are training for a 5K, not always so easy, but what runners often tend to forget is that for someone who's not running at all, 5Ks is a long way. So for beginner runners, and to that zone 2 question around beginner runners, that's literally why it's so effective now, because you've got a much higher probability of getting to 5Ks and being able to walk 5Ks far sooner than if you just try and train yourself to run the whole way without a walk. It's going to take you a long time to build up to that. But if we start off with walking 1 minute, or running 1 minute, walking 4 minutes, and then every week we transition to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes of running, 1 minute of walking, you will probably get to 5 kilometers much quicker, because your time to exhaustion will be much longer if we do that transition through like that. But then also, if you are training to run a very fast 5 kilometer, and we see this often, and that's part of the reason why on our platform I like to have the 5K 3-mile time trials every couple of weeks, is because when people start on this journey, I want them to see, like, if you fix a lot of the things, then in your short-term gains will be huge. So even when you're training for a very fast 5K, you are running quite long runs on the weekend. And so if we implement this run walk strategy, you immediately just get the advantage of freshness. And so often when people are so blown away by this plan is so fantastic, well, actually the very first improvements we see from people are probably purely coming about from freshness, because the run walk strategy has meant that their bodies aren't working so hard in between runs to repair all the damage, because there's less damage. And because there's less damage, we're fresher, and there's a knock-on effect. And then we often get that first 5K is like, wow, that's the fastest I've run in, and it's normally years, never mind months. But so yes, it works across the spectrum, but much easier to convince people to do it when they know they've got a very long run on the weekend.
Yeah, and it happens quite often. I speak from experience, because this has happened to me too, where one of the things that particularly us as amateur athletes struggle with is pacing. In a race situation where we tend to go out way too fast and then blow up. That's just the sort of way things go until you sort of dial it in and learn how it should feel and intensity and that sort of thing. And we've done a real deep dive on pacing on this podcast as well that you can go back and listen to. But often it happens, Lindsey, where you talk about that 5K, and we see it in the forum on our platform, where somebody goes out and they've been using run walk strategy in their training, and then they go and run a 5K, but they go and they run their first 1 or 2Ks really hard. By the time they get to like 3.5, 4Ks, they are blowing and they feel like they're going to die. So they take a quick walk break just to almost like reset and get their heart rate down. And then all of a sudden they go again and they feel great, and they end up running a PB, and it blows their mind that they can run a PB including walk break on a 5K. It's the same. It's the same sort of thing from a racing perspective.
Yeah, and in that scenario, it's literally just giving your body that opportunity to get ahead, catch up, cardiovascularly catch up and recover. So that's not how we would like to use a walk break, but it gives us clues as to why it is so effective, that you could actually have it as part of even a 5K strategy, to have a very short 5 to 10-second walk, just to literally allow you to cardiovascularly catch up with where you are. But in the slightly longer race formats, you can then use that for that exact purpose. And a hill is a prime example. If you have a hill in the middle of a 5K race, 10K race, half marathon, whatever that case may be, is what you'll often see is that people get to the top of a hard climb and then they have to use the downhill to either recover, or, so weird, they start walking as they get to the top of the hill. It makes no sense to me. Rather, take 2 shorter walks on that hill so that when you get to the top of the hill, you aren't cardiovascularly gassed, and you can go over the top and really smash it down the hill and take advantage of the easier running, rather than having defended the line with everything you've got up the hill, but now we just have to jog and recover down the other side of the hill.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsey, what are some of the, I mean, we've spoken about the physical benefits. Are there any psychological benefits of employing a run walk strategy?
Yeah, over the long term, I think in the short term, probably a little bit the opposite. I think some people are like, oh, it's almost like admitting defeat if I need to now employ walk breaks in my running training. So maybe the immediate psychology isn't there, but I think that comes quickly. It's like literally, because of those physical benefits, you will immediately start to feel better physically. And when you feel better physically, your confidence grows. And when your confidence grows, you start to get all those positive benefits. You start looking forward to your running again. You start looking forward to going to run races again, because you start to hope that your next race, because I've been in that cycle a little bit now, is that every time you run a race, it's slower than the last time you ran a race. Whereas, if you start doing these things properly and consistently and right, you can start looking forward to races. Cross country season will be exactly that. It's like, now I'm going to look forward to getting better as the cross country season goes along, because I'm doing all the right training at the right time. And so with that, that's very much the psychological win that you will get out of doing it right.
What are some of the most common sort of like misconceptions or mistakes that you see runners, particularly over 50, making when it comes to the run walk strategy?
The biggest mistake is simply waiting until you have to. So that's another saying that we have, is that walk before you have to. Because as soon as you start walking when you have to, that means you're actually in a zero-sum game. You'll just have to start walking sooner after the next run, and you'll walk longer, and you also can't do the purposeful walking. So that's when you're walking because you have to, that tends to be slow and lethargic, um, and kind of negative way of doing it. So that's probably the biggest mistake. And then, yes, like walking too slowly and just ambling along instead of walking with purpose, because then it does slow you down way too much. And then people feel like, no, don't, that's not what I want out of this. So those are probably the two bigger kind of mistakes. And then the misconception, you've kind of alluded to it, is that the misconception is that walking equals slow. And you can definitely still run fast and compete with a run walk strategy.
And then, Lindsey, what are your thoughts on using technology versus doing it by feel? So almost like putting a time on your watch. And the reason I'm asking is because that's what I do now, and I absolutely love it. I don't know how my life was before I got a Garmin that I could do that on. But where you programming it in where it goes, whatever your strategy is. And I can talk a little bit about mine and some of the things that we've been playing with timing-wise that might be helpful. But what are your thoughts on having it dialed in, that it has to be at every 10 minutes, you get a 1 minute walk, or should you be doing it more on feel?
No, I like the strategy much better, like knowing that it's either going to be in kilometers or time. whichever works better for you. And I just had someone 2 weeks ago finish London Marathon on a run walk strategy, and it was a very hot day. And so they said, like, in the last 6 miles, they flicked their strategy from so it was a 6-minute run, 1-minute walk, and then they flicked it around to a 3-minute, 1 minute, just because the conditions got really, really hot, and they only started at 11 a.m. So right at the back. So no, I like a strategy. It needs to be flexible, like what happened with Jeff. No relation to Jeff Galloway. But that's must have some flexibility. On a very hilly course, you'll have a little bit of ability to walk when you need to walk on hills, but your overall strategy should be there in place, and a watch is a very effective tool to use for that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned London Marathon, because it was 2 years ago that I ran it, and I ended up having a coffee with Nikki Friedman, who's one of our coaches who lives in London, while I was over there. And I'd always used a run walk strategy, but it wasn't like a super, I don't know what, it wasn't like a super formal, like, this is how far I'm going to run. I just knew that, like, I would run walk. Like, that's what I used to do. It wasn't like a formalized thing. And it was on that trip where she spoke about what she likes doing with her athletes is a 14-1. So 14-minute run, 1-minute walk, because that breaks the hour up nicely. So like on the quarter hour, there's something, and I tried that coming out of London with my training coming out of London, and I found that 14 minutes was a bit too long for me. Like I found like I was almost going too far, that I needed the walk more than actually like the strategy, as you say. Like, you don't want to get to the point where you're needing it. So I then changed it to a 7. I'm trying to think what the maths was. It was like I cut it in half. So it was a 7.5-minute run. Or no, it was a 7-minute run, 1/2-minute walk. And what I found was that the run interval was great, but the walk wasn't long enough. I didn't feel like I was getting enough benefit from the walk. So what I've changed it to now is I'm doing a 9:15 45-second walk. So it's on a round number, so it makes it quite easy. If I haven't missed, I'll just look at my watch, and if it's a 10 around there, then I know if I might have missed it. But I'm finding that for me is perfect. So 9 minutes, 15-second running, 45-second walk. It's just enough of a walk. It's the run interval's just long enough that I feel like I still feel good, but it's cool that I get to walk. So it's like, you've got to find what works for you as an individual, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of that goes to personality, part of it goes to how it feels for you, part of it goes to what's easy to do, So in a race scenario, in our local races, we've got refreshment tables every 3 kilometers, so just under 2 miles. Internationally, those are at 3 miles or 5 kilometers. So it could be like you just walk through every aid station. So it's got to be something that's easy, that doesn't require tons of thought, lots of maths. It's got to resonate with you from a personality point of view, and then it's got to be practically implementable. So those are the things that are all coming together when you've got to make your final decision on how to do the run walk.
Yeah, and a lot of it is trial and error. And the cool thing is with these sort of devices, you can put those intervals on, and it beeps when you need to run, beeps when you need to walk. I just need mine to be hooked up to a car battery, so that like 60 Ks into an ultra marathon where I don't want to run anymore, it shocks me that I have to keep running. But I've yet to find one of those devices. If anybody does find one, maybe I just need somebody to walk behind me with a cattle prod. I don't know. Maybe that's what we need. It's like, you need to run. It's time to go. So yeah, I haven't found one of those yet. Any sort of parting shots, Linz? Do you think we've missed anything on this? I know it's a huge part of what we do. It's particularly in the over 50s market. It's in that sort of demographic of who we're working with. It's made an immense difference. Like I always have a bit of a quiet chuckle when I'm in the forum, because like I said at the start of this podcast, we get a ton of pushback. This is one of the things that people just struggle with when we tell them that this is what you need to do. But as soon as they sort of buy into it and they start feeling better, it's like they become the biggest sort of advocates for it.
Yeah, so we definitely haven't left anything out, and I think that sums it up there, is that we are runners, and therefore we must not walk, but it is just such an effective tool to bring more joy, pleasure, and improvement into your running. And so that is why if you aren't implementing it, you should start implementing it today.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can ask you before we wrap things up, if you haven't yet, please do leave us a rating or a review on whatever podcast player you do listen to this podcast on. It really does help us get in front of more runners just like you and help them improve their running and their lifestyle and keep them active and fit for many, many years to come. So please do take just a second to just leave us a rating or a review. We really do appreciate that. Lindsey, until next time, thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to catching up again. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers, everyone.